Welcome back to the Immigration Guy podcast. It's been, I don't know how long since we did one of these, but excited to be back here. I have Wade with me here. We brought Wade in because he has the most radio voice of anyone that I know. And I realized that, recognized it in him early on. So welcome, Wade. Good to have you here, man.
Thanks, Kyle. I really appreciate that. Some of us are just born with that talent, and some of us have to develop it over time. I'll let you decide which one I have. So
I hate to think some of both. I like to think some of both before the podcast about your broadcasting career, Wade. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
well, way back before in the before times when I was a young man, my first major in college of many was broadcasting. So my professor in college, the first one that I had, the classic radio voice. It sounded every day like you were calling movie phone.
Dude, that is so good. That is so good. Also, I don't know if I could pay attention to a professor that's talking like that the whole time, because the whole time I'd be thinking, man,
It was a challenge. It was that year I had the movie phone guy as my broadcasting professor and a guy that was from Scotland that sounded just like Sean Connery every single time for my astronomy class. Could not pay attention. It's like there's a reason why I had to drop out of college after my sophomore year.
Wait, what were the other majors that you pursued during this 2-year stint?
The first time I was a broadcasting major. I was a history major, and then I flipped over to be a film major and moved to California to make movies for a while before I moved back and finished my degree.
Wow, fantastic. Where'd you live in California?
San Diego.
Okay, awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
That's great.
it's a great place to be when
all
you're a man. So
Yeah, I would imagine so. I would imagine that spot. I just got back from Napa last week, and man, California's just so beautiful.
I love it.
Well, let's talk a little bit of immigration here.
Yeah, let's do that.
We're gonna talk about some things that are new and developing, and how what things are, what matters, what doesn't matter,
Yeah,
what's noise.
absolutely. This month, I thought we could talk about temporary protected status. There are so many new developments happening right now in the world of immigration. And as far as employers, what do employers need to know right now about temporary protected status? So I really want to know, just to start things simple for those who don't have any experience within immigration or just stepping a foot into it for the first time, what is TPS? And can you break it down in just simple language for us?
Yeah, of course. A lot of people get confused because they bucket a whole bunch of different types of people into the TPS category or the asylum category. There's a bunch of different categories. And the thing that oftentimes confuses people is they kind of group it all together. And so whenever they see a new executive order, they think that the executive order might have broader reaching implications than it does, or they might think that it doesn't go as far as they think it could have. But it's really important that you actually understand the different mechanisms, TPS being one of those. And we see TPS all the time. It was created in 1990, the year of my birth, humanitarian immigration benefit. So a lot of people think that this is also something that's conveyed to people that gets them on a pathway to citizenship or lawful permanent status. That's not the case. Really, the three things that it does for people is it protects them from deportation, gets them a work permit so they can lawfully live and work in the United States for a temporary period of time. And then in some cases, they can ask for advanced parole for travel so that they can leave and come back, which is different than something like an asylum. Asylum is not so easy to leave and come back, especially if you're trying to go back to your home country from which you're claiming that you need asylum, which people do, and it does not go well for them. So that there's been some recent changes with TPS. And, I think that the real problem with TPS is that it's been abused from, I think, how it was really originally intended. The other thing that makes it harder is that it's also kind of hard to get rid of after the fact. So one of the things the Trump administration recently did, the Biden administration allowed for TPS for people from a wide range of different countries, like Venezuela, for example, Haiti, uh, and they do it through executive action and then through the USCIS. And so this is also another misconception: is it's not that you're letting a lot of people illegally. A lot of them were actually paroled into the United States on TPS. There was no illegal entry. Uh, what the Trump administration did whenever they came in was they immediately tried to remove TPS status from a lot of people that already had it. So they were already paroled into the United States. There was a bunch of people that claimed TPS status, and then the Trump administration had to take that away. And in doing so, there was an injunction. The Trump administration's action for trying to take away TPS. The thing that I always think is weird about that, and see it kind of both directions, but the thing that I think is weird about that is whenever something's created by executive action, I don't understand why it can't be removed by executive action, but that is what happens. And so, in a lot of ways, TPS is pretty vulnerable to court action. And so, what the Trump administration did is, and the way that you do it is you grant TPS at a particular time. So, it's like a specific circumstance where you're granting TPS. So there's 2021, they added Venezuela to the TPS list, and in 2023, they extended them. And I think they're extended in 2-year increments. Or no, maybe it's more than that. Anyways, the Trump administration went to repeal one of them, and there was an injunction on that. But there's also just a phasing out. So I think that if you're actually going to get rid of TPS in certain circumstances, the way to do it is to not revoke it, because that evokes potential court action. I think that what the Trump administration is doing now is actually going to be the way that they end up getting rid of a lot of TPS, which is they simply don't renew it. So I do think that over the next year in particular, there's going to be a lot of people that fall out of TPS status that were here. And whenever they do, they're not going to have lawful working status that can be protected from deportations. And so they're just going to be here illegally. And so it's one of those things that's pretty tricky. And the thing is that a lot of the people that come in on TPS, they're not bad actors. I also don't know what the prevalence is that they're, fleeing some sort of persecution or serious imminent harm. There are a lot of economic migrants in the United States, obviously. You do have a mutual benefit to that. That economic migration, I don't think, is necessarily a bad thing. A lot of employers really benefit from this. A lot of employers end up relying on these people. And so whenever TPS is removed, it makes them in a scramble to replace those people. And then the question becomes, how are they going to replace them? And it's really tough, because the reality is that a lot of these folks are doing jobs that you or I would not want to do, that Americans generally do not want to do. And there's this fallacy that you can just pay people more. There's plenty of Americans that will take those jobs. Anyone that thinks that is not living in the real world, or doesn't really understand the types of jobs that these people are taking, or doesn't understand the actual economics behind how things like your food are priced. The reality is that in a lot of ways, and I think this is probably the spot where our immigration system is most broken, is it's a globally competitive market, and we receive an ability to compete, even though our labor costs are significantly higher, through things like efficiency. The United States agricultural system is significantly more efficient than any country in the world. We also have higher labor costs, so it offsets that. And the more that you hurt, particularly the farmers, the meat processors, which is that those folks are going to be disproportionately impacted by the removal of TPS, and it really harms their ability to compete on a global stage. So, but I think the administration knows that. I mean, they've hinted strongly that they recognize that, and they're going to be looking for legal pathways to protect those people. Although I haven't actually seen them do anything with it. I know that there's a strong push on the Republican side to avoid doing anything like that from the people that I really think simply don't understand basic food economics or operation.
So let's talk about that employer side just a little bit. So as an employer, somebody who hires some people that are here, on TPS. What needs to happen now? What do they need to do in order to prepare or respond to those changes that are coming up in TPS?
Well, the first thing that I would do is they hire people that are on TPS. They get their EAD card, and that's what they use to validate their I-9. Just to step back a little bit on what would the implications have been had TPS effectively been removed from people that had EAD card. This would have put employers in a really tricky spot because there's really no good way to go and ask their employees, hey, did you fall out of status? They don't know. They have no idea. They don't know if they were one of the ones impacted by it. All they know is they're from this country, they've got an EAD card. The one thing is you're an employer, you don't just go and fire everyone from a particular country that has an EAD card because you're going to be vulnerable to discrimination claims, obviously. But they also wouldn't know if they were inadvertently hiring someone without legal status. I guess you could argue that they had lawful working status without a legal immigration status. But I don't know. I haven't seen that one tested out in court. But that would have been really weird. So I'm glad that's not. Now, if you're an employer where you think that there is particular vulnerability with your workforce, you need to be planning accordingly. You need to actually understand how many EAD cards, see when they expire, make sure that if the person meets the criteria that you would suspect that they're on TPS and not going to be able to renew their work permit, that you're planning your workforce accordingly. It does require you actually looking in the future. My biggest fear is that what's going to happen is TPS is going to expire. These folks aren't going to be able to renew their EAD cards. Employers are going to go to re-verify on their I-9s, and they're not going to be able to. And so all of a sudden, they're going to think, well, now I'm scrambling to fill this void. But that doesn't have to be the case. They could be looking at it more preemptively to figure out what they need to do from a workforce planning perspective to try to mitigate the impacts of the TPS rule changes.
So what you're saying is if the employer just does nothing and just ignores it, then they could effectively just be caught in a sticky situation of not being able to hire people and then not being able to fill those positions as time needed, right? And we all know how difficult and how lengthy the immigration process is to get some of those temporary workers, those seasonal workers, and it can take, in some cases, 6 to 18 months in order to fill some of those positions. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I do think that there's going to be a large number of employers caught with their pants down, but I don't think that they need to. It's like they're looking 6 months in the future saying, hey, my pants are going to be down over there, but they don't want to actually look into it. But they need to be looking at their I-9s, actually making a data-driven decision on workforce planning based off of their I-9s and that sort of thing.
So how would this impact then somebody's ability to plan for seasonal work? Like what's different with the loss of temporary protected status for somebody else that's planning, has hired a lot of TPS workers before in the past? Those people might not be able to be rehired if they lose that status. What changes do they need to make now? Do they need to look elsewhere for different kinds of workers? Do they need to have a different strategy for their employment? What is it that they can do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of times folks in TPS status are not employed on a seasonal basis. Sometimes they might be, but a lot of times they're not. And that's one of the nice things because in the agricultural world in particular, in the meat processing world in particular, they're filling a void that our immigration system doesn't really serve right now, which is if you don't have a temporary or seasonal position, then you don't really have a good immigration category for unskilled labor, which is what a lot of the TPS folks fill. But you can still recruit people on other statuses. Say someone came in and filed for asylum status and they're just stuck in the backlog of asylum cases and they've got an EAD card. That's a whole separate mechanism that's not even being touched right now. And so there's more safety in that. And also, I don't think that it can be touched for reasons I'm happy to go into. But the point is that if you're an employer and you're looking at that circumstance, you really need to be talking with someone that has a comprehensive understanding of the immigration laws, diverse tools at their disposal that they can use to fill in the labor gaps. And that's what we've worked towards the whole, probably since 2018, which is just, how can I solve this problem? How can I solve that problem? That's really what employers need right now. They need someone that can help guide them through that. Is this a good visa category or bad visa category? Do you have a visa category? If you don't have a visa category, how else can you solve it? That's the thought process they need to go down.
Yeah, so as people are navigating the changing landscape, and it feels like that landscape is shifting pretty rapidly these days. There's a lot of news coming out about immigration and how we're handling immigration within this country. So if you could put on a fortune teller's cap really quickly and look out into the future, do you see any changes that are happening in the next 6 to 18 months that employers need to be aware of or just be cautious of as they're planning for their workforces in the future?
Yeah, I do think there's going to be a lot of more changes. Predicting them is kind of hard. I'm always a skeptic whenever I think about legislative changes. So I think the Republicans are going to make a push for some sort of immigration reform, probably not on a large scale, but on a smaller scale. But also, I'm generally skeptical that's going to get through. Usually the incentives from a political perspective are so different between the two political parties, and even within the Republican Party is pretty fractured from an immigration perspective. You've got a whole coalition of Republicans that think that we need to curb migration significantly. Then you've got a coalition of Republicans that understand that immigration serves an important role in our country. You've got Democrats that really want amnesty more than anything else. No Republicans want amnesty. So I just don't really think that legislative reform is very likely. Regulatory reform, I think, is significantly more likely. And I think that the administration's already shown that they want to reduce regulations as it relates particularly to the H-2A visa program. Then the question becomes, well, how much can they do within that framework? It probably won't be within the next 6 months. I would expect that to be probably the next 12 to 18 months. But I do think that they're going to make a big push to reform the H-2A program in a way that it's more usable, probably less regulated. That'd be my guess. I think you're still going to have a big gap, though. That big gap is what's being served right now by folks on TPS, for example, where they're working in these meat processing plants, because that's not agricultural. And so the H-2A reforms don't really help those people. And so the question will end up being, how will the administration handle the impact on those meat processors if you take away a large portion of their workforce? And I think that the administration's aware of that. I have no idea what they intend on doing about it, though. It's a sticky political situation for sure, but they got to do something about it. I mean, the reality is that our food security is a significant national security issue. And I don't think that they're overlooking that. They don't want us importing a lot of meat products from other countries. They want us producing them here. So if we're going to produce them here, you need people to do it. So how are you going to meet that gap? That's what I don't know yet.
So I guess the follow-up question to that obviously would be, if I run a meatpacking plant, or if I'm in agriculture, if I'm in construction, if I'm in any of these industries that hire a lot of people that have a TPS status, where can they go? Where can I go as an employer to find out the most updated information? Where can I find these resources? Because employers, they just want to work on running their business. They don't need to be an expert in immigration. And with the amount of changes that are happening right now, it's really difficult to keep up. So what resources are available to them right now that they could use? Where should they go to find that information?
To us, is a good spot. We get it from a whole bunch of different places. It's from news articles, which generally when I see news articles, I'm really only halfway paying attention to them because I want to know what the actual executive order was, to know what the actual implications are, because they're generally not experts in immigration either. And so I think that that's basically what you can do is you can have a trusted resource. There's a lot of really good associations. The NPPC, for example, is a really good association. There's a bunch of them. The Turkey Federation is a really good organization, and they do a really good job. The NCAE is a really good organization, and all these organizations do a really good job of keeping people apprised of new regulations and how it's going to impact them. I'd say get involved with organizations that are relevant to you. Make sure that the ones that you're getting involved with have some sort of labor and regulatory division or resources allocated to that. But most of them in these industries do. They're generally pretty good at being on top of that stuff and know really well how it impacts their members.
Or as you said, just keep coming back to the immigration guy.
Or just keep coming back here and getting to hear your radio voice. That's why I'm here.
All right. Well, one last thing before we wrap up, I just want to know that everybody can take something valuable away from this. So what's one thing that employers should walk away from this episode with?
I would say that if I could give one piece of advice, it would be to know that things are going to change rapidly and be prepared to adjust accordingly. So don't be the guy that is getting caught with his pants down whenever he has no reason getting caught with his pants down. That I think that's the main thing here. You gotta actually pay attention, look out. There's going to be a lot of changes, but also don't overreact. It's a pretty fluid process.
I think that's good life advice. Just don't get caught with your pants down if you don't need to get caught with your pants down. So something everybody can walk away with.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up today?
Yeah. Wade, I've had a great time listening to your voice. I prefer you would have said a lot more than I would have said, so I could have just sat and listened. But I really appreciate you being here and appreciate you setting this up. And I'm excited to be back. Excited for the immigration guy to make a reboot. I don't know if people thought that I got deported, but I did not. We are in a good spot.
We'll tell you what, I will give you a little bit of a gift, as we say. Thank you for listening to The Immigration Guy. Stay tuned for future episodes.